And Josna, we're still tracking all the reactions which are going to be coming in at this point. His papacy heralded many firsts, and while he never stopped introducing reforms at the Catholic Church, he remained popular among traditionalists. That is something that everyone knew about Pope Francis. He was the first pope from the Americas or the Southern Hemisphere, and not since Syrian-born Gregory III, who died in 741. He was also the first Jesuit to be elected to the throne of St. Peter. Jesuits were historically looked on with suspicion by Rome, but Francis' predecessor, Benedict the 16th, was the first pope to retire voluntarily in almost 600 years. There is a lot of history that comes here, and is the first non-European pope in centuries. And that is a legacy that he will, of course, carry with him. And the Vatican, as we're just announcing for our viewers again, the Vatican has confirmed Pope Francis has died aged 88, leaving 1.5 billion Catholics around the world in mourning at this point. His health was in bad condition, but he made a rare appearance and a rare public appearance at St. Peter's Square, in front of 35,000 people from his balcony. And this was on Easter, which will be marked as a very special appearance that he made, which would turn out to be his final appearance in front of a packed audience. Brothers and sisters, happy Easter. This was a quote-unquote of Pope Francis. He made a surprise appearance post the pneumonia recovery. All right, for more on this, I'm now being joined live by Scott Lucas. Scott is Professor of International Politics, Clinton Institute, University College Dublin. Scott, of course, Pope Francis is no more, aged 88. He had been struggling with his health, and we had been hearing of that since several months, since February more than earlier. Your thoughts on this at this point?
Well, that's absolutely right. The Pope had almost died early this year. From complications from a long-standing lung condition that he had when he was a young man. So with the recurrence of double pneumonia, he was on the point of death, but he came through that. And indeed, as you're showing on some of your clips right now, not only did he not recover, but actually go back into the Vatican. He actually made public appearances, including the appearances this past weekend for Easter and the meeting with the U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. But it was just a matter of time. One hopes that he passed away peacefully and without too much pain. What he leaves behind, and what we'll probably be discussing as his successor is named, I think is a very different Catholic Church from that he inherited in 2013 from Pope Benedict, in a very different world. And it will be interesting to see if his different approach to Catholicism, with ideas on economic and social justice, whether that continues or whether that will be rolled back both within the church and because of pressure on the church by some conservative forces.
Scott, as you mentioned, we had been hearing of his health, which was constantly deteriorating. There were enough fears of, this happening earlier as well. And now it has been, of course, confirmed. He never really recovered. That was obviously clear. But he did manage to make a public appearance, which was recently, and that meeting with Vice President, which would turn out to be his last public appearances or photographs which were made public to everyone else. But at this point, it's not as if the church would not have been prepared for this, if as far as the procession, which is to be carried out as of now, what would the procedures be for Pope Francis as of now, and then what follows?
Well, you'll have now the paying of respects. You will have the ceremonials leading up to his burial. These will take place over the ensuing days. You will see, I think, of course, many eulogies to him. I think most of them will be complimentary. There may be some critical remarks, again, from conservatives, but I think generally this is a man who was greatly admired in the way that he conducted himself. Then we will move to the part about the successor and who will be the successor. And I'm sure that your viewers know all the rituals around this. They know the notion of the conclave of cardinals that will be held behind closed doors while we wait to see whether there is black smoke, that there has not been agreement, or white smoke to announce the new pope. One fact I think to watch here is that Francis has appointed about 80% of the cardinals who will make that decision. So I think at the very least, his successor is likely to be more in the moderate line of the church rather than the conservative wing of his predecessor, Pope Benedict.
Scott, as far as his 12-year papacy, he suffered various ailments. He was never always in the best shape, I would say. You know, health concerns were always there. He battled through it all. These last few months were extremely torturous, one would say, because we would always be hearing of news of the double pneumonia and all that he would have been personally going through, but never shied away from his responsibilities.
Well, again, this is a man who suffered a serious lung condition with pleurisy when he was 21. And despite that condition, which would have limited many of us, he continued to pursue his work within the church, rose within the church, and he was very active. You know, he's very much on the front lines of social movements, on economic movements. So while he was not in the best of health, he didn't let him slow him down in terms of his religious activism, if you want to put it that way. And even in his, you know, in recent years, when he quite obviously was serious health concerns and often in a great deal of pain, he continued to try to be that visible pope. He continued to try to lead by example. I think we can talk about his approach to policies. I have issues with some of his policies, and we can talk about that at some point. But I think in terms of what he aspired to be and what he showed others to be, in terms of his compassion, in terms of his devotion, and perhaps most importantly, his idea that no person was better than another, that the church should look after all people, wherever they were, whatever their economic status, whatever their social status. I think that was quite refreshing after a Catholicism, which I must say, at some points, had looked after some people, but had tended to put others on the margins.
Understood. Scott, I'm also joined on the broadcast with my colleague Jyotsna Kumar. Jyotsna, if you're there, please go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. As you mentioned, Pope Francis is a figure that he's not just a pope and talks of church, but is like he has been talking of like multiple issues and international issues, environmental issues, social issues. So how would you remember Pope Francis as a person?
Again, as a person, I think you look for leaders, especially in these very tense times, who are decent, who are tolerant, who are respectful. And again, while you might disagree with Pope Francis in terms of some of the positions he takes, you may disagree with the church in some of the positions he took, he always exhibited that decency, tolerance, and respect. And I think it's important to say in this forum, including for other religions, so that Catholicism did not have to position itself against Judaism or against Hinduism or against Islam. That Catholicism in part was a part of a multi-religious world, a multi-confessional world, in which we needed to find a way of getting along rather than confronting each other. Do I wish he had been more outspoken at times on issues like women's rights, on issues like reproductive rights? Yes, I do. Do I wish he had been more outspoken in terms of some of the international, effectively violations, crimes against humanity that we have seen? I'm thinking of Russia and Ukraine, for example, Israel and Gaza. Yes, I wish he had. But I think he was a man who tried to avoid confrontation and always trying to find the way of conciliation, tried to find a way of talking with people rather than talking against them or down on them.